Hello and welcome to Season 1, Episode 20 of Jacked and Being Frank. I'm Jack Monos. I'm your host, Jack Monos, here with your co-host, Frank Aranio. We will discuss about the Mets rotation that was already underwhelming, but it gets the injury bug with their two highest paid pitching signings this offseason in Sean Manaea and Frankie Montas getting hurt. Two different injuries, but one's out for a longer period, one's out for a short period. But we'll talk about all that. Knicks continue to prove why they are far off from being one of the title contenders with the two big embarrassing / disgusting / offensive, whatever words you want to say, you want to put for that performance. Those two performances this weekend. Also on the show, we'll discuss about the U.S. and Canada hard-fought championship game that ended with a Connor McDavid goal. The first question I want to ask is, what is the most concerning part of these losses to Boston and Cleveland? Is it the effort, lack of execution / scheme / coaching, Tom Thibodeau, or is it lack of depth?
Well, Jack, I'm going to defer all that to you momentarily because you're the NBA basketball Knicks expert, so I think it's much better for the audience to hear you break it all down. So I will stick with what I've been talking about and focusing on with the Knicks is obviously they're a good team, but it's disappointing in a way where they're at because I don't think they have any chance of getting past the second round because the Celtics are 6 games behind the Cavs. But even outside that, even if the Celtics somehow caught the Cavs, which I don't think they're gonna, I'm just looking down and look at the standings right now. There's 25 games left for each team, and the Celtics are 6 back. They're not going to go after that. Like they could maybe if they pursued it, but they're not gonna. They're gonna, I don't want to say
Knicks got
coast.
waxed by Cleveland, so what are we saying? Knicks got absolutely waxed way off the court.
I just have this mentality of Boston's the best team, but maybe I'm wrong. Like maybe that's closed-minded, and we should be saying Cleveland's the best team. But Boston's the champs, so I'm going to stick with they're the best team. But Cleveland's excellent, And I still say, well, let's see Cleveland in the playoffs, but we can't see them in the playoffs until we get there. So in terms of the Knicks, I'm kind of walking it back a little bit. Like I'm saying, they won't get past the second round because they're going to play Boston. Well, even if they were playing Cleveland, they're not getting past the second round. So it's disappointing because, again, the Knicks are 37-20. So, yeah, it's a very good regular season. They won 50 games last year. They're going to win 50 games again. They're going to win more than 50 games. I'm just trying to do the math here. Like, for them to get to they're probably not going to get to 55. That would be 18-7. But they're definitely going to go 50-plus wins. So they're going to have another very good regular season. But the Knicks are at a point where it's not about the regular season anymore. This year was about being a serious contender, maybe for an NBA title, but for a serious contender in the East, to compete with Boston going into the season. Now it's Cleveland as well. But, to compete at the top of the Eastern Conference and at least, be very competitive in a conference final. Like going into the year, it was like, okay, lost in game 7 of the second round. This is the year to get to the conference final for the first time in a quarter century. But, the Knicks aren't getting to the conference final. Like, how is that possible at this point? I know you say if they get healthy, maybe they make a run at it. But, I mean, and I don't want to make too big a deal of regular season games because playoffs really are a different thing. But you're going up against Boston. Right, so champions, and then Cleveland, you could say, okay, when are they going to become playoff time?
Yeah,
but it's very disappointing, and I don't know how the Knicks situation changes in terms of having a legitimate chance of not only getting past the second round, but now being competitive in a second round series. I'm willing to lower the bar, like, okay, give me a 6-7 game second round series. And I'll take it, and then you go from there with the Knicks, renaissance here. But I don't see how they're even competitive in a second-round series against either of these teams. And then I'll throw this out there. I don't think this is the case, but are the Knicks in a situation where they could be in trouble or in a competitive first-round series?
Yes, I think they could, but I think the concern for me is not that they're losing the games. It's like looking at the roster and saying, this is it. We're not getting any better than this. Maybe the salary cap gets better. Maybe you get some better bench players next year. But the Knicks are not going to get any better than this. Also, the news, I also didn't want to talk about this, but I think it's worthy to talk about because this is not an excuse or anything. The guy, Mitchell Robinson, will not come back and change the team and change losses and W's. But again, him being the starting center, Thibodeau announced, kind of, is a big thing. I mean, Nick starting Mitch, Carly Towns. I mean, the defense is atrocious. So I think you got to try out whatever you can. I think it's the lack of execution here. I think the way the Knicks play defense.
Is there any part of you that revisits the trade with the Timberwolves? Or no, it was the right thing to do. There's no second guessing it. Because as you talk about the defense, I remember when the trade was made, you were very much for it. And I said, yeah, you basically got to do the deal. But we talked about the defense and how the defense will suffer with this trade. So is there any revisiting that trade, or that's going too far?
Well, I revisit the trade that happened this summer. That happened this summer that involved a lot of draft picks. Now, I hate that we want to bring up draft picks here. It's not something that we want to bring up. But again,
well, if the Knicks aren't moving the ball forward this year, and again, we got to see the playoffs. It's all about the playoffs. So if they go in there and, again, I'll lower the bar and even say, okay, a very competitive second round series. Say they lose to Boston or Cleveland in 6 or 7, very good series. Okay, all right, I'll say, you know what, disappointing, but a good season. The renaissance of the Knicks continues. But again, can you go back and look at this trade and then you say draft picks? Well, I don't think you can just poo-poo draft picks. They're important. So I don't know. Do you want to go there? Do you want to revisit it? Or is it it's just not the time to do it? Or it was the right deal, leave it be?
You could definitely revisit trades. I'm not big in that. I don't want to revisit trades now, but when there's a trade like Mikal Bridges for 6 first-round picks, and there's a lot of stars out there that are playing better than him, or even role players.
Well, right. So that's the trade you're talking about, the draft.
That is the trade.
I'm also talking the Timberwolves trade.
That's going to go down as the Knicks' biggest fleece in Leon Rose's tenure. As bad as he is defensively, I think it is not the greatest trade in the context of the Mikal Bridges trade, but I think it's a fleece, player for player. Look at it, one of the biggest fleece in Leon Rose's tenure, getting off of Julius Randle and getting off of Donnie DiVincenzo. Those two probably didn't even have the total amount of points Karl-Anthony Towns has. The guy's a monster offensively. Now, defensively, I do think it's lack of execution, but I also think it's lack of Thibodeau putting him in the right place at the right time. Now, Knicks were doing very well switching pick and rolls. Now, when they run a drop coverage, which Thibodeau runs, Jason Tatum just torched it the whole entire time he was playing against the Knicks. He just ran right to the rim or ran right to the mid-range. But when the Knicks switched it, I know it's crazy putting Karl-Anthony Towns on an island with Jason Tatum, but it worked pretty well. He stuck his man, but when Cat's going to have to try to maneuver his body in different ways and try to contest and try to pop that three-point line and try to contest Porzingis, that type of stuff, you're giving him too much responsibility. And that's where Mitch comes in. It can help clean it up. So he doesn't have that much of responsibility defensively where he has to do all that stuff, where he's trying to play in drop coverage, trying to get back three-point line. Now he can play kind of roam defense, can still use his size because he's a pretty big guy. 7 foot's not something to laugh at.
So is his defense enough to solve their problems, or it's still going to be a struggle to get to where they need to be?
Well, again, you got to look at the Timberwolves' outlook and the way they moved him to the 4 and had Gobert at the 5. Now, again, Mitchell Robinson is not anything like Rudy Gobert in the way he has one DPOYs. Mitchell Robinson is pretty close. And the way they can pair those two together and they can kind of make Cat's defense better or make Cat's defense have that defensive possession less hurt for him. Have him not have that big of an assignment defensively, because being an anchor of a defense is a big assignment. That's why teams that have those great defensive centers usually go on and win, because that is a big role of a team, being that defensive anchor, even with a three-point shot, still a big thing. You do not want to give up easy layups. So that's a big responsibility. And having somebody Mitchell Robinson who we know does it at a high level and can do it well, and also can rebound well. The Knicks rebounding has not been well at all, not been good at all. That's getting extra opportunities. So if McKelvert is missing his three, it's over. That possession is over. Those are some things that extra opportunities. You give Knicks 2 shots at threes. The way this offense works, I think that is big.
I'm looking at their scores. I mean, I know the NBA is very high scoring now, but giving up 142 points against Cleveland, they gave up 148 in a win against Atlanta at the Garden. 131 to the Celtics, 118. It's like 118. Oh wow, that's a good job. 118 points allowed. But I mean, it's once the playoffs come, even in this era, it becomes more half court. It becomes more defense. You saw the Knicks defense in the playoffs last year. And injuries really did them in. You can't totally use injury excuse, but the injuries in that playoffs did them in. If they stayed healthier, they would have beat Indiana and made it to the conference finals. But I mean, do you have any optimism here that these last 25 games, 6 weeks,
Look,
they could – go ahead.
My optimism here was the Knicks in January looked unbeatable. No one else could stop them. So what is now February or January to the end of the season or to the playoffs is a whole different spectrum.
They also didn't play Boston or Cleveland in January.
Yeah, I know. In that January, but they were playing some good teams in Minnesota who went to the finals. They beat Minnesota, went to the finals.
They beat it by 17. Yep.
Yeah, they beat those type of teams, and they were unbeatable. So the teams that are good in February and January, it's a whole different game in the playoffs. But I understand that. That's something that you could hold on to hope to. But again, 0-8 to all these elite teams is something you cannot hang your hat on. You cannot look at and be like, whatever. No, you have to actually look at it. And I feel like Tom Thibodeau is actually looking at that. He has to look at that, and he has to be like, we need to build this team in a way that can beat these guys.
Well, I think for the Knicks, it's all about being able to beat Cleveland and Boston. That's what it is. And, it's a good thing because the Knicks are now at this level. It takes you back to when the Knicks were really good in the 90s, and they didn't win a championship and get to the finals twice. I mean, you take that. Knicks fans are dying for a championship. I throw myself in there. I mean, you're, the diehard of the diehard I used to be, but I'm a Knicks fan. Knicks fans want that championship, but man, I mean, you would take it if they were in the finals twice in 6 years. But that's what the Knicks are back to. It's all about competing with the elite teams in the league, and it looks right now that they're not even close to being able to do that. So the next 6 weeks, the next 25 games, what has to happen for you to go into playoffs and say, all right, should get past the first round. They'll take care of business there. And then, you feel like they'll be competitive in a series against Boston, probably, but Boston or Cleveland in the second round.
Well, who knows if this group goes through a first round series and learns how to be battle tested together. I mean, this new group is not battle tested. And the thing about that last group, they had it. You didn't have to go through a series to know how battle tested that team is. They had it. They were.
But how much would you learn from the first round anyway?
No, I mean, if this team gets together, gets battle tested, I mean, this team is getting. I think.
Well, I would say you don't even want to be battle tested in the first round because if you have a battle in the first round, you're in big trouble. So you really should be winning a fairly easy series in the first round if you're going to have any chance of advancing deep in the playoffs.
I mean, you could still be. I think with the bright lights and all that stuff. I mean, it's still the 6th seed is not going to be a team to laugh at. So they're going to still
right now the Pistons who have had a resurgent season, but they're a young team.
I would say a battle in one game could get a team battle tested, especially with all the bright lights. And
I get what you're saying. So if one game comes down to the wire, even in a series where you win in 4 or 5, you could have a game or two to come down to the wire. So yeah, I mean, there's that aspect of being battle tested, but you certainly don't want it to be a series. You got to go 6 or 7 against Detroit or, I guess, Indiana and the Bucks are in that mix too. I guess it depends on the opponent too. Like I look at the Pistons, they're young and they've had a resurgent season. But if you get them, I would think that's got to be a
I'd
series.
rather get the Bucks or the Pacers.
Yeah.
I think they're a better
Why
match.
is that?
Well, because they're both two offensive teams, and I just feel like our offensive team is better. Now, if you get a defensive team that can maybe contain the Knicks,
Yeah.
but if you put two good offensive teams that can't play defense together, the better offense team is going to come out and on top. And I'll take the Knicks in an offensive battle a lot of the time, especially if it's against
That's
the
a good point. I would feel good about the Knicks against the Bucks. They crushed them in January. I was just looking at the schedule. I remember the game too, but they beat them 140-106. I think they'll take care of them. The Bucks, I know they won a championship 4 years ago, but they're now frauds. So it's a good point. Indiana beat the Knicks last year, but the Knicks were banged up.
And again, the Pistons are going to try to bring that, style that they play, which is grit and grind. So they could contain the Knicks. They have some good defensive guys on that team.
I just feel like I'm with you on the Bucks. To me, the Bucks are frauds, but Indiana, these teams a ton better than I do, but just on the surface, Indiana is more of a veteran team. They got to the conference finals last year. They beat the Knicks last year. Like, I just, on surface, would be more concerned about Indiana than Detroit, but I defer to you because you know these teams inside and out, so you could really break down the matchups. But I'd rather face an inexperienced team, a team that has not been to the playoffs in a while, up and coming. I just rather that than a team that has experience that got to the conference finals last year.
Well, I think I want to
beat the Knicks.
Yeah, I also want to kind of change topics. Still stay on the Knicks, but I think also a thing you were talking about is competing with those two teams. That was the one thing which I didn't bring. I just wanted the Knicks to win. I'm a big guy just winning, but you said competing and taking those moral wins. I honestly think that's correct, and the Knicks are getting pummeled. No pride, zero, and I feel like the Knicks team the last few years had some pride. And that's why I say battle-tested. This team has zero pride. That's what I feel like. I feel like this team is a bunch of guys who are going out there and content. There needs to be some hustle and some grit and grind, because that's what the Knicks have been built off of.
And so the Knicks lost what they had last year in terms of that grit and that defensive toughness.
Where's the identity? Where's the want to? Like, I feel like they hung it up after the Cavs game. I feel like they didn't really battle back. They battled back against the Celtics, but that's whatever. They got a Tatum and a bench line, a bunch of scrubs. So they battled back against a team with Tatum and a bunch of scrubs. So whatever. You can have it. Cat played well.
They've been non-competitive against Boston in 3 games this year. They play them one more time in April.
Yeah, it's just,
I don't see how anybody could feel good about it. How do they have any chance to compete with Boston in the playoffs?
What I want to see is some waxing, especially waxing on Wednesday against the 76ers, who will most likely definitely be without Joel Embiid. The guy always hurt. He's probably going to have a new knee or something, whatever he has, a new knee or something.
Yeah.
They're a team in the 76ers that you have to wax. You have to pull them off the floor, and you also cannot give up. I don't want the Knicks to give up more than 110. That's what I'm saying. Knicks are gonna have to lock down, especially when you give the excuse that you didn't have Mitchell Robinson, your defensive anchor. Now you have him. There's no excuses anymore. You're fully healthy. The whole lineup is healthy. Everybody on up to down that roster is healthy. First time in a long time.
Yeah.
You cannot give me excuses anymore about, we're going to do it a 1-point win against the 70s. Do not give me that. The 76ers team has never gone to a 1-point game, I don't think, in the last few games.
They got to take care of the Sixers.
They're a terrible team. They should annihilate them the way the Bulls did last night. The Chicago Bulls annihilated them. They were up by like 50 at one point. I'm not even exaggerating. So this is a team that you got to pummel, and you also got to lock down. I don't want to see the Knicks winning 130-120. That's not going to make me impressed anymore, especially if you're not playing the Cavs or the Celtics. So you have to win in ways that I want you guys to win, because it shows me something. If this Knicks team wins 120 to 99, that showed me something. That showed me you can lock down for 40 minutes. That showed me that you can score against these
and you keep bringing up the defensive end. I think that's more important. Like, I rather like that. Keeping them under 100,
But
110,
also,
even
I
like
think
110 to 99. But instead of like a 130 to 115, you gave
like the game
115
against
points.
the Hawks in overtime that won 149, 148. I'm saying, okay, congratulations, you won.
To me, it's like a loss. I know it's a
Come on.
win, but it's like a loss. I mean, you have 148 points against a bad team.
Yeah, and
You keep saying defense, and that's the way to go because come playoff time, despite basketball having changed a lot over the years and it being such an offensive game now, playoff time, it gets more half court.
well, yeah, because you
It
see all the
gets more
superstars.
defense oriented. Still going to have high scoring games, but defense becomes more prevalent. Guys step up their efforts, so I think that's the end of the floor to focus on.
And I'm going to have to see what this whole Mitchell Robinson thing really is. Because again, I could see where he just doesn't do what people want him to do, and but again, he had like 2 years to recover, and I think he's probably like in a great place. So I want him to get. I mean, again, it's get in game. So once he gets to the playoffs, he'll definitely be able to be fully integrated and be playing his normal minutes, whatever Thibodeau wants to play him. I mean, still, the lower extremities still need to be worked out. I mean, you don't really want to overuse him, but still, you can play him whatever minutes you want in the playoffs. But right now, I want to see the Knicks slowly get Mitchell Robinson into this team, and he's not really a new player for them. I feel like Jalen Brunson has played with him for a long time, and they should know. And also, Cat has been playing with a big like that for a long time and for a year in Gobert, so he shouldn't really have a real chemistry type thing. I mean, this guy is a sit in the paint, block some shots, catch some lobs, get some offensive rebounds, and bring some energy. That shouldn't have any chemistry issues. He should be able to do that by himself in the first game.
I'm looking at the Knicks schedule. They have a long West Coast trip in March. They go to Lakers, Clippers, Kings, Trailblazers, Warriors.
And also, if the Knicks don't
That's a grind of a schedule. And then they play Miami at home, and they go back on the road. They play San Antonio and Charlotte. But just the grind of being on the road so much and being on the West Coast for a long time. It's going to be interesting to see how they
interesting.
They get through
You
that.
started a Lakers game. Interesting. It's going to be very interesting. If the Knicks lose again to this Lakers team, I'm going to look at them like, not even this Lakers team. No, new. Completely new. Because they traded Anthony Davis the night after. So if you lose this iteration of the Lakers team, I'm going to look at you like, really? Like, you can't compete with them? Like, then we have issues. Then we're going to have to lower you down the tier list. And it's going to be really telling what tier the Knicks are in. Can they blow through a team like the Lakers? I don't know. It's going to be a real test because the coaching, again, against the Lakers, I think Thibodeau's the edge. But look, I don't know what that's going to be a big game, I feel like, for the Knicks, especially on the road in LA on a big road trip. That's a team that you have to look out for. I think it's circle of a calendar right now. I know the Knicks are playing the top of the top competition, but that's still a game against a top team.
And anytime you go on a West Coast trip, it's a grind. So it's going to be interesting to see how they do out there. I mean, it's never easy going out to the West Coast for a lengthy road trip.
I mean, it's also so interesting. The Knicks dominated the Denver Nuggets. And the Knicks also dominated the Memphis Grizzlies and the Houston Rockets, I think. So those are three teams in the Western Conference that are really good. But then the Knicks play the Cavs and the Celtics, and they fall short. I know, but I feel like the Cavs aren't a team you lose by 4. I know they're great. I understand that. They're on a hot streak. They can't miss from 3. They have amazing players up and down the roster. But really? Really? Like 40-point loss?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, look, the wins and losses are important. They reflect how you play. But as you've been breaking it down, it's going to be really important to see how the Knicks play.
How they bounce
now
back.
and the end of the regular season.
Does Jalen Brunson look at the team and say, hey, we have an obvious problem here. We cannot keep giving up 120 to 130 points to every team we play.
Yeah.
That's not a good way to win basketball games. And again, I think it comes back to the Knicks having Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns are two non-defending players. Like, I mean, not saying that they're absolute cones. I mean, Jalen Brunson gives his effort, but he's 6'1", 6'1", being generous. So he's a guy that is going to get posted up, and he's going to get kind of in a playoff series when teams are going to be looking to pick at guys. When you have a player like, for example, Jason Tatum, you're going to be looking to get Jalen Brunson on him, and you also have two players that you can look to get on Jason Tatum. You want Cat, you want Brunson. Those are two guys in the starting lineup teams will try to attack. So that's putting the Knicks at a disadvantage when they put together a roster like this.
Why did you make today's title Knicks can't compete with the Heat?
Oh, I said the elite.
I was like, what?
It autocorrected.
I thought you were mocking them, saying they can't even compete with the Heat.
No, it was an autocorrect to the.
Yeah,
the
I got you.
But
yeah, I just noticed that a minute ago. I'm like, can't compete with the Heat.
But yeah, I mean, again, I think that's a big thing. The Knicks have, like,
well, you could say like they can't handle the Heat, not the Miami Heat, but they can't handle the heat of playing against the elite. So that makes sense.
But I think there was a good quote that I saw that the championship team isn't always won on who has the most talent, but who has the least amount of flaws. Like, the Knicks have two flaws. I know it's Jalen Brunson amazing. It's amazing, but his defense is a flaw as much as he tries. Cat's defense is a flaw. So those are two flaws already. And you look at the Celtics up and down the roster, 5 players through. They're flawless. I mean, Drew Holiday does it on both ends. Jaylen Brown does it on both ends. Derek White does it on both ends. Kristaps Porzingis does it on both ends. Jason Tatum does it on both ends, of course. You see that team and you look at the Knicks.
They're good.
They're flawed when you compare that. Jalen Brunson, a one-way player. Mikal Bridges, I guess he fits that thing of can do it on both ends. OG can do it on both ends. Really concerned about his offense, but Josh Hart can do it on both ends. And then you got Cat, who's a one-way player. So you compare that to the Celtics, and it's a flawed team. Flawed starting 5, which does really. I mean, if you get Mitch in there, maybe it's less flawed.
Our conversation today about the Knicks, and largely our conversation about the Knicks for a while now, has been largely critical. However, their record's 37-20, but the fact that we're being very critical of them, it's not just us, but we're being very critical of them, and the 37-20 shows what the expectations are, and it shows how the Knicks have progressed. It shows, how the Knicks have had this resurgence and renaissance, and they're in the conversation to compete with the NBA's elite, but they're just in the conversation. It doesn't seem to be a reality that right now they can compete with the NBA's elite, because the NBA's elite are Boston, Cleveland, Oklahoma City. Those are the 3 teams you put in the elite. Is there anybody else you put in there, or is it just those 3 teams? And it doesn't look like the Knicks are going to seriously compete with any of those 3. And you can't even talk about Oklahoma City because they're in the West, so it's the 2 teams in the East. So in a way, it's a good thing because it shows that the expectations for the Knicks are really high. But they're not coming close to meeting those expectations. And 6 weeks out from the playoffs, is it 6 or 7 weeks, whatever it is, it's like, I don't see
no moves to make. It's like
the Knicks no moves to make, but it's like, can they get this thing together? And you said the defensive side, get it together. Where they could go in the playoffs, and it's like, okay, they're going to take care of business the first round, and then they're in line at least to be highly competitive. I mean, to beat Boston in a playoff series, like it's going to take Boston being off their game, and the Knicks being right on top of their game. But at least you got to be able to play a competitive series that goes at least 6. So. Doesn't look good right now, but you also don't want to overblow the importance of regular season games.
Yeah, but
the way they're losing these regular season games is very alarming. I mean, they've been non-competitive with Boston 3 times, and 2 of them have been recent. You want to throw out opening night? Go ahead. Yeah. But the 2,
one that I went to and the one that was just a few days ago. So
yeah, the last 2 have been in the last couple of weeks. So you can't throw those out. And then the Cleveland game was a few days ago.
And it was a
So,
disaster.
yeah, and
I mean, you
throw
might
out
as
the
well.
first Cleveland game because the first Cleveland game was in October.
Yeah, it
So
was.
throw that. So
I think
throw
the Knicks
that one and
competed.
throw the first Celtics game out because they were in October. But you got 3 games that the Knicks have been non-competitive in.
That is that's because I'm not looking at regular season wins and losses. I understand that the regular season is whatever, but when you see trends, you know trends and you see them,
Yeah. Well,
and they matter.
I say whatever to the 37-20.
Yeah, I mean,
It's all about competing with those 2 teams above them, and the Knicks are going to be the 3 seed. Like, we pretty much knew since October the Knicks would be the 3 seed in the East. All right. Oh, wait, no. Wait. Take that back. No, that's a false
a
statement.
top 2 seed or top. Yeah,
No, I shouldn't say that. Not since the beginning of the season. Since, the Cavs got off to that ridiculous start. So I don't know, since December. No,
yeah.
so to start the year, it was the Knicks are probably going to be the 2. But then Cleveland's had this great season. So, but we've known for, I don't know, a couple months now that the Knicks are pretty much going to be the 3 seed in the East.
Yeah, I mean, it's about what. Like, I feel like I don't see the Knicks going out. Like, I don't see like the Knicks going out like that. I don't feel like a Tom Thibodeau coach team will go out like that.
Go
But I
out
don't
like
have any
what, in the
doubts.
first round? Or go out
No, I mean go
in the
out
second
like
round?
absolutely get crushed by the Celtics and lose. Like, but right now it's like this Tom Thibodeau led team doesn't look like it has the wheels that it did last year. Or it doesn't look like Tom Thibodeau's footprints are over this team. It looks like it's a bunch of guys who are trying to get their individual stats. They're not playing as a team, which I know 37-20. Throw it out the door. When they win because Jalen Brunson has a ridiculous game or Cat has a ridiculous second half. It's individual stuff. When the Knicks won, they won as a team. I know Jalen Brunson has ridiculous, he's a ridiculous player, but they won because Don DiVincenzo made 3 threes, because Don DiVincenzo made a big stop, because Julius Randle came alive in the third quarter. They won because of a variety of different reasons. This Knicks team only wins one way. It's by individual. It's by is Jalen gonna save you or is Cat gonna save you? They don't win as an individual. This is all about their individual stats and what they can do as an individual.
How does this get better? As I listen to you talk, I'm like, I don't see this getting better. It's just
Right now, I think
they're not set up to compete with Boston or Cleveland. They're a different team than last year. I mean, we talked about the trades before, and you said, well, the Cat trade, that was a fleecing. You had to do that. But they're a different team this year. I mean, you remember the playoffs last year, that Sixers series. That was a terrific basketball series. And that was the most fun playoff series I've seen in a long time. I mean, that brought you back a bit in terms of how that series was played. I mean, that was a terrific series, and both of the teams went after it, but particularly the Knicks. Is like the Knicks are kind of like an old school team. Like it's just max effort. It's good defense, well coached. And then the second round. I mean, the injuries really did them in, and you can't just say, "Oh, injuries are the reason to lose." I don't like ever doing that, but they kind of were. If the
Game
Knicks,
7, Jalen
if the
Brunson
Knicks
goes out
were
with a fractured
healthier,
hand. Jalen Brunson went out with a fractured hand.
yeah. They got derailed by injuries. Could they have somehow gritted out Game 7 and won a close Game 7? But if they had gotten to Boston in the health they were in, I mean, they would have got smoked. They would have got swept or lost in 5.
Yeah.
Not to rehash the whole playoffs last year, but that Knicks team, it was like, oh, if they could build on that next year, like they're going to be right there to compete in the East, but they're a different team. I mean, they've added offensively, but they've subtracted defensively, which doesn't bode well to try to beat the elite teams in the playoffs.
Well, also with Mitchell,
like a baseball team, Jack, that like a baseball team that wins 100 games in a regular season. They hit a bunch of home runs. They're powerful offense. Pitching's pretty good, but they get carried by the offense. And then they get to the playoffs. They're out early because playoffs is a lot different. Versus a team that wins 90 games, doesn't have the offensive firepower of the 100-win team, but that team's better built for the playoffs. And then they wind up going on a deep run.
Yeah, I think
Apples and oranges, different sports, but it really appears like the Knicks are that.
yeah, it does. But I feel like it's a whole thing of Cat being behind these perimeter defenders. It puts them in a big disadvantage. I mean, Mikal Bridges can't get beat. He can't do his steals. He can't really make him so. He just has to stay in front, and he has a lot of responsibility. So having Mitch down low could do something for their defense and make OG like the wings stuff that we saw. Like their wings could be one of the best defensive wings in the league. Man, this team has gotten cooked. It absolutely fried. So you're looking at a team that could be different with Mitchell Robinson at center. Could those wings really be more aggressive and really show themselves?
Well, there's your hope. Hopefully,
Yeah,
with him being back in there, it gets their defense where it needs to be. I mean, it's possible. I think if anyone is being overly optimistic about them
Mitchell
getting to a
Robinson.
point where they're seriously going to compete with Boston and Cleveland, I don't think you can get too optimistic about that. But hey, I mean, I guess we don't have to totally write them off. You never know. And again, I've said this a few times, but you don't want to over magnify the regular season. Throw out those first two games against Boston and Cleveland, one against each team. Throw them out there in October. But those three recent games, it's fair to take a look at those games. And now they play them in April. Okay, Knicks are totally healthy. Let's see how they do in April. But then in April, the other teams, Cleveland and Boston, they're going to be taking the foot off the gas. So how much could you even tell from that game? Because those, pretty much by then it'll probably be, okay, Cleveland's locked into the 1, Boston's locked into the 2. They're kind of coasting, getting themselves ready for the playoffs. So how much will those games even be contests that we could take much from? So I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, but I feel like the Knicks are going to be playing hard because they got demolished. And I'm not going to, if Mitchell Robinson comes back and just hypothetically the Knicks go on a big win streak, I think it depends on how the Knicks win. Like a big win streak's whatever. Like the Knicks have gone on a win streak like they did last January, as we said. Like whatever. It's all about is how are they going to win, and are they going to lock it? Are they going to be a defensive winning team? They don't have to do 90 to 88. They can still score, but that defense needs to be up to par. And they need to be demolishing these bad teams and mediocre teams. They got to just demolish them.
Because if they're going to try to win games against Boston and Cleveland that are really high scoring, they're going to lose those games every time. But if they can make it more of a defensive battle, like you said, it's not going to be 90 to 88. Those days are over in the NBA. But more of a defensive battle, those are the type of games that the Knicks will have a better chance to win. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because the Knicks offense is better when the game's in a defensive battle because they can score in many different ways. And the Celtics, they can score in kind of one way, and that's a three-point shot. That is what's working. That's what always worked for them. So whatever. But I feel like the Knicks can score inside on the three-point line. So when you get in defensive battle, I think the Knicks offense is going to succeed more in a defensive battle. That's why I don't understand why they don't play more, why they don't try more to do that, because they can't. But when the game gets in defensive battle, I have the Knicks offense over any offense because the way they can score in many different ways. They can score inside, they can score from three. So that stuff is definitely going to help, and especially in a half-court offense. So if that defense gets better, I think the sky is the limit for this Knicks team. But hey, only time can tell.
Well, I'm going to leave it at this. I'm not going to totally write him off. It doesn't look good. But, hey, I believe in Thibodeau. The guy's been around a long time. He's a really good coach. So hopefully with Robinson coming back, they figured out defensively, and they get themselves in a spot where they go into the playoffs, take care of the first round, and then go play a very competitive series against Boston. I mean, it's going to be a while till we find out. But hopefully they do that, and then just as a fan and the excitement of it, it'd be great to see the Knicks, make a good postseason run and get the Garden rocking again.
Yeah. So talking about another team in New York that is.
I'm just going to grab my water, so you kick it off, and I will be right back. I'm listening, though.
Another team that has a bunch of offense, and the defense is. I mean, the defense is fine, but the pitching is not there. But the pitching already wasn't underwhelming already was underwhelming, but they lose Sean Manaea and Frankie Montas, and that makes a team with that kind of David Stearns was kind of saying
Frankie
this team.
Montas is always hurt. You can't
Yeah,
bank on that guy.
yeah,
I wouldn't even factor him into the equation. He's always hurt. The Yankees signed him. He was hurt all the time. You can't rely on him. I honestly, Jack, I would just throw him out of the equation.
yeah. But
Manaea is obviously a much different story.
Manaea is a big story, and you know, two big, a big pitching arm in Manaea with a team that's already underwhelming pitching wise.
They needed to do more in the offseason, pitching wise. I mean, yeah, we talked about it. I mean, they needed to do more. They're a good team, but everybody's competing with the Dodgers. I don't think they come close pitching wise. The Dodgers pitching is I mean, the whole roster is absurd. But
Yeah,
the Dodgers pitching is so much better than the Mets.
yeah, I think obviously that's something, but I think the Mets are really looking at is a trade deadline going to come around, and are we going to get a guy available? I mean, look at the Marlins. The Marlins stink, but Sandy Alcantara's dealing. So can the Mets kind of do something like that? Can the
Will
Mets?
the Marlins make a trade in the division?
Well, yeah, no, I mean just a play like that.
Yeah, a guy. I get what you're
Yeah,
saying. Yeah,
yeah, a guy like that is dealing, but his team stinks. So that's the thing. Like a lot of the difference between the MLB is a lot of teams want to sell when their team when they invest in that team and then their team starts stinking. They want to start to sell. So the Mets can definitely take advantage of that. Their team is good,
yeah.
but
The problem though with baseball, there are those teams, but there's more playoff spots now, so it tends to make it more of a seller's market because more teams are in the mix for a playoff spot. So yeah, you're right about the trade deadline, but the trade deadline is July 31st. So there's 4 months of baseball before that. And I've always been like that. Okay, get to the trade deadline, and then get what you need. But you have 4 months of baseball that are very important. So I just think the Mets needed to go into the season with better pitching because it's all about compete with the Dodgers. For the Mets, it's not just, okay, even win the division. It's winning a World Series. And in order to do that, you have to compete with the Dodgers. And I think the separation between the Mets and the Dodgers has grown. Even though the Mets have got Soto, the Dodgers are just loaded up. And the Dodgers are just, on paper, far and away better than anyone. So, the Mets pitching, they needed more. It's not bad, but they needed more than they have.
they need more. And I feel like if you're gonna have these experiments, you at least need to make them to the trade deadline. You can't just experiment in Clay Holmes and that stuff. I mean, the guy, I know it's not the ace, but the guy looks good, and you want to
Yeah,
have
I don't
that.
know what that's about, though. I mean, when they said they're going to make him a star, it's like the guy's been a reliever. I mean, I don't know.
He was a star for a little bit, but the guy has good stuff. I think they saw something in him. They definitely David Stearns and Steve Cohen definitely saw something in him. But look, I just feel like you got to give this stuff
To me,
time.
that's a mid-market move, though. That's something a mid-market team does. Maybe it works out, but my knee-jerk reaction to that signing was like, what? I mean,
I'm not gonna hate on it because it worked. Until it doesn't work, then we'll do. Then we'll. That's why I'm gonna give it to the trade deadline because it worked last year. I'm not banging on it working this year. Turning these pitchers into good pitchers that can give you these innings. Um, and he also stocked up on the bullpen. So you're looking at a team that is going to need to the trade deadline because they're going to have to experiment with some stuff. And why am I gonna really have a knee jerk reaction to this underwhelming pitching off season if
yeah, I mean,
it worked last year, but I get it. I understand it.
Their rotation's underwhelming.
I do think it's underwhelming, but it was underwhelming last year. But I know there's different expectations. But it did work last year. And you had a bunch of guys who were giving you 3-2 ERA, and you had guys contributing. And maybe it's the new MLB. Maybe it's the MLB that you don't really starting pitching. Is it the? I know. Maybe David Stearns ahead of the curve. That's all I'm saying. And maybe stocking by the bullpen is the way to go. I'm not saying it's the right thing, but I think there has to be something about it because he did
How
it 2
good is
times
this
in a row.
bullpen? I mean, I'm looking at their bullpen. I don't know. I mean, it's
Eh,
it's not a great bullpen. There's depth there, and the bullpens are unpredictable. Like you could think going into the year you have a great bullpen or a very good bullpen. Relievers are very year to year, and there's
That's what.
injuries. So like, I don't know. I mean, sometimes you come across a bullpen. Well, that's a great bullpen. That bullpen's loaded. I don't think the Mets are that. It has the potential to be a good one, but bullpens are very volatile. So the game's going more and more towards bullpens and relievers. Starters don't go deep in games, but I think when it comes down to it, you can't minimize the importance of the starting rotation. There's still the most important part, not only of the pitching staff, but of the team.
Well, yeah, I do think so, but I think the Mets did are going to try to build off of last year, and the way they did it, they still had starting pitchers who gave you 3-4, 3-2 ERA, and was still
Well, if
pitching.
Uh, Senga, I put
Saying
together the K in his first name and saying Senga. There's a nickname, Kanga. If Senga comes back real strong and he's an ace, well, that's a game changer for the
that's a
Mets.
game changer.
But you
That's
can't
yeah.
go into
You
the season and say, well, you could lock that in. He's going to be the ace. You don't know because he was out the whole year last year, basically. So, but that's a big X factor. If he's the guy as the ace, well, then all of a sudden the Mets have a very, very good rotation.
So if you're gonna break the Mets rotation out, Senga, hopeful ace, Manaea, a very good pitcher. I think he's shown.
I think
He's a
he's a
very good.
two.
Then
He's
you
your
have
two. Okay, he's your two.
then you have Peterson, who's like he can build off of what he did last year. He pitched very well in his long relief role. Can he bring that to this year? And he's also a free agent next year. So can they kind of put him in that role where he build off of last year? It's a big if, but the way he pitched last year gives Stearns and company some hope that he can do something this year and really show himself and have that breakout season or whatever the breakout season is for a third starting pitcher. Then
Now,
you have Clay
I
Holmes.
see Peterson started 21 games last year. Did he have an injury? I don't recall.
Why did they move him to long relief? And then they had the game where they would usually pitch him after Senga in that game where he went 2 and then Peterson went 7.
In
So
the playoffs.
yeah, in
But
the
he's going to be
playoffs,
a starter in the regular season. The playoffs, you have a shorter rotation, but he's a starter.
he's a starter. I mean,
Yeah, last year in the regular season, he appeared in 21 games. He was a starter all 21. So he's a starter, but he became a reliever in the postseason. Yeah, the Mets rotation, I mean, they're definitely going to be going after a starting pitcher before the deadline. I just would have liked to see them, if I'm partial to the Mets, I would have liked to see them have another high-quality starting pitcher in this rotation. I mean, they have the money. Cohen's all in. So, yeah, I mean, they have enough to have a good regular season, get to the deadline where they're either in first place or close to it, definitely in a playoff spot at that time, and then you add. But
and maybe
know that
Senga
other
goes
teams are
number
going to be
3.
adding, particularly the Dodgers. Expect the Dodgers to make moves too.
They can still make moves. But yeah, I mean, look, that does that does push Senga to 3. If he really isn't pitching that well, they still have some hope. They can move him to 3. So there's some stuff they can do once they get the trade deadline. But again,
yeah, they're definitely going to need they're going to need a high quality starter. It's not just like depth. They're going to need a number 2 type starter before the deadline.
Yeah, they're definitely.
I mean, you got to see. Like, if Manaea has a really good year, it's like, okay, he's the 2. Senga has a really good year, bounces back, he's the 1. Then okay, go get a 3. But it's gonna be at least a number 3 starting pitcher the Mets have to get. Because again, the Mets are good, but it's not about being good. It's about being toe to toe with the Dodgers.
Maybe Steve David Stearns and company thought that the trade deadline is a place where they can get a starting pitcher, and they are confirmed. Like, we 100% know that this free agency didn't really go out the way we wanted to pitching wise, but we know that the starting pitchers in July will be better than the starting pitchers during free agency.
Yeah.
and we trust our guys enough to go till July where we bring in that guy.
May very well be the case. And I like your thinking because the Mets have a really good GM, a really good owner. Their leadership, their brass is really good. You should feel good about it. So, yeah, I mean, that very well may be the thinking. Look, we're not just going to sign a starting pitcher or trade for one right now just for the sake of it. We got enough for now. We got a very good team. We got enough starting pitching to be in a good spot come July, heading towards the deadline. So, yeah, I mean, look, that very well may be the wise thing to do. I just, on surface, I think it'd be nice for the Mets to have gone into this regular season with another high-quality starter. But if they go and get somebody for the deadline, it's a big splash, really bolster the rotation, whatever else they need at the time. You can always use pitching, you add a bullpen piece. Everybody's always looking to do that. We do have to reassess come July 31st what the Mets look like.
Yeah. It will definitely be in the pitching.
And they're going to score a lot of runs. You got to love the lineup.
Yeah.
I don't even think we got to talk about the lineup because you got to love the lineup.
Yeah.
Unless there's something with the lineup you want to address. I mean, I just think Soto, Lindor, Alonso, and then you got other guys too. But I mean, that lineup is locked and loaded.
Yeah, I mean, the Mets bringing an outfielder, traded for one, is Starling Marte on the move, something like that. But it's not a lot. Is Jose Iglesias going to come back to the Mets? Stuff like that. But
is he a free agent?
Yeah, he's still a free agent.
Oh, sign him. I love him. He was on the Red Sox for a short time. I love that guy. He's a winner. Great defense. He's an old school hitter. He gets big hits. He's good in the clutch. He's a baseball player. I love that guy. Sign him. That guy to me, like you want him as a piece on a championship team. He's not a big piece, but just he's a winning player.
Yeah, I do understand that, but the the Mets are gonna see what they got in spring training because they have some young guys they can definitely bring up as utility. So yeah, the thing is that you don't need to go through a spring training to see what Jose Iglesias is. You know who he is, so you can see what Brett Brady, Luis Angel Acuna can bring you in spring training because they need it. And then maybe you can knock on his door because you know what he will bring you.
I wouldn't mind the Red Sox getting him for a depth piece.
Yeah, or somebody like the Yankees who might.
Trevor Story is really injury prone.
And there's a lot.
You got the whole thing with Devers and Bregman, Christian Campbell. They say he's either going to be ready opening day or shortly after play second. But hey, I mean, bring Iglesias on board as a depth piece, and then if you have an injury, you plug him in there.
And also, do the Mets bring back Jose Quintana or not? Is he completely washed up or not? He did have some problems with his walking. I do think it would be a good piece to kind of slot in, to have more.
He's a depth piece. To me, the Mets, if they're really going to make a run at the Dodgers. With all the injuries,
I think, you would bring him in to pitch a couple innings while Manaya's hurt, or maybe until Montas picks up baseball. I mean, who knows about him?
I would just not even consider Montas part of the team. You can't rely on him.
Yeah, but it's 6 to 8 month period.
But again, Quintana is just like a depth piece. It's like, yeah, he's serviceable, but
he did pitch a big game for the Mets. He did pitch a big game for the Mets and came through. I don't know what game. I think it was game something of the Philly series. Pitched a big game, so he could be a pitcher that it's familiarity and also to think about, will these pitchers show up in spring training, and do we trust these guys? And we know what Jose Quintana doesn't need to go through a spring training to know what he is. So we can knock on his door always at the end of the day and see what his contract will be. So those are the two players, Jose Quintana and Jose Iglesias, are two guys that you don't need to go through a spring training. You don't need to bring. You know what they will do, so you can always knock on the door.
And they're contributors, but again, the Mets more long term with this season, they got to get another high-quality starting pitcher.
Yeah.
So I think there's merit to what you said. See how the regular season unfolds before the deadline. You don't want to just get someone now. Maybe, there's better options to trade for. You brought up Alcantara. We'd have to do the research and go through more guys that could possibly be available before the deadline. We'll certainly do that as we get closer to the deadline. But hey, again, look, the Mets are obviously a very good team, but the Dodgers are far and away on paper better than anyone else. So it's going to be about trying to catch up with them and have a legitimate chance to compete with them in a postseason series. And then in the division, the Braves are good. I expect the Braves to be very good this year. I don't think the Mets are anywhere close to a lock to winning the division. You look at the betting over/under win totals. Like I think the Braves are actually a game higher than the Mets
Yeah, I think the
in
Braves have a
terms
better
of the
shot of winning the
over/under.
World
So
Series.
what's that?
I think the Braves have a better shot winning the World Series in some betting site or something.
Yeah, so Braves Mets,
Yeah,
that's going to be neck and neck. And then you can't count out the Phillies. I don't know what they were thinking this offseason. They didn't do anything, but they're still good.
yeah.
They should still be a playoff team. I think we haven't made our playoff picks yet. I want to dissect it more, but the Phillies are a favorite to be a playoff team. You can't write them off for the division, and you never know with them. They could clearly have a good season, and then you see what they do before the
And
deadline. So
Cole,
it's
yeah.
definitely a 3-team race in the NL East, but I don't even know if you could call the Mets the favorite because the Braves, they're ready for a bounce back year.
You can't because the pitching is a bunch of what if players, and I understand that full-heartedly. But
the Braves get Strider and Acuna back. Like the Braves are really good. So
yeah, but they
it's
did
going to
lose
be a neck
three,
and
but
neck
they
race in the
still, yeah,
NL East. And I'm not quite sure where I might pick the Braves to win it because
yeah.
they have it's tough
Can't really
selling
pick
picking the
anymore.
Phillies, but Braves Mets. I think that's a real battle for the division.
Yeah, I mean, I you know what I would go for of who's going to win the NL East. I mean, of course, I think the Mets would win, but I do think that you could have a definite case of the Mets could finish second in the NL East because
Oh, there's no question about
the
it.
pitching is a what if. Because what if
Yeah, the Braves pitching's better.
what if Manaya's batter? What if Manaya can doesn't? What if this one thing was a 1 year wonder? What if Senga just is an injury prone type of guy and will never really be his full potential? What if David Peterson was a 1 year, or what if David Peterson just doesn't work out? What if Clay Holmes doesn't work out?
Yeah, and the
Those
Braves
are a
have
lot
their
of what
what ifs
ifs.
too. Like Strider's got to come back from a big injury. Chris Sale had a Cy Young year, but what's he going to be this year? I don't know. I mean, there's a question there. Can he do it again? Really good year last year. Stayed healthy until the end of the year. But the Braves have the potential to have a dynamite 1-2. I mean, not only a 1-2, but have two aces at the top. So there's real potential there. So yeah, I mean, Mets Braves, it's neck and neck, it looks like, as we start the season.
Yeah, so we'll see as the MLB goes through spring training. But I also wanted to talk a little bit about as we end the show. A tiny bit about Canada defeating USA. It was a big time battle. I think it was good for the whole entire NHL. I didn't want to tune in and a game would be stink because that game went to overtime. That game had everybody talking for the next 5 days. So that was a game that I think the NHL needed because they didn't need for all this publicity and then for them to just put out a crappy game. They didn't need that. They didn't need that for the game to be. They didn't want that. They don't control the game, but they didn't want that. So they didn't want the game to end up being 5-3. They wanted the game to be close to the end. And that's what the game delivered. Every expectation you had, the game delivered. From everybody playing the hardest. I mean, the goalie for Canada did like a crazy move. I don't even know if they allow you to move that way. He was going out for everything, and
Binnington had a great tournament. He won the Stanley Cup with the St. Louis Blues, had a great run that year in 2019. And he won the Stanley Cup in TD Garden in Boston because the Blues defeated the Bruins. They won Game 7 in Boston in 2019, so they were in TD Garden for the championship game. In Canada, we know, won in overtime 3-2 on Connor McDavid's goal, which was an assist from Sidney Crosby. So that was really cool, having Crosby to McDavid, two all-time great Canadian players. So, I mean, this tournament, when I first heard about it, I'm like, all right, whatever. Like, who cares? Nobody's going to watch this. It's just a gimmick. But it's remarkable what it turned into. And it it got jolted with the first Canada-USA game. You went into the tournament. I don't think anybody was talking much about it. You had the first round of games in the round robin. So the 4 teams each had their first game. So USA played Finland in the first game. I don't even know the game was on. It was like whatever. But then USA Canada on that Saturday night. What's that now? A week? Was it a week and a half ago? Yeah, a week and a half ago that game. That's that Saturday night. And it was when those fights broke out, 3 fights in the first 9 seconds, and then just the intensity of it. You had the Canadian fans booing our national anthem, and just the atmosphere, the electricity, the fights, and then the actual game. Canada got up first. USA comes back. USA wins the game. It's like, whoa, like we really got something great here. And then people were paying attention more. People were paying attention more to the third game for each team than they were the first game. So Monday came of last week, and you had Canada-Finland in the afternoon on President's Day. USA played a meaningless game Monday night against Sweden because USA already clinched being in the championship, and Canada had clinched it earlier today. But still, USA and Sweden, those teams played very hard Monday night. And then you had all this buildup in anticipation for the championship on Thursday night in Boston. And, the ticket prices, they were going for $1,100, $1,200, $1,300 just to get in. It dropped, but still it was like, $800 just to get into the building. And then the actual game, and the game lived up to the hype, the atmosphere, everything with it. The end with McDavid scoring, Crosby assist, the way Binnington played. I mean, what a remarkable tournament. And great thing for hockey. Hockey's a great sport. My favorite sport is baseball by far. And I don't know if this makes sense, but baseball is my favorite sport. I think hockey's the best sport. I think hockey just is a tremendous sport. The athleticism, these guys are on skates, how fast they skate, how strong they are, how skilled they are. Like, I don't know if like this really is an objective thing, but people have their preferences. And again, baseball is my favorite sport. Basketball is your favorite sport. But I've been saying for a long time, hockey's the best sport. It's so impressive to watch. And then it's so much better in person. You go watch a game in person, and then particularly up close, it's remarkable what these guys do. So I'd love to see the game grow in America. I don't see it ever being close to, the other 3 sports. But I hope it gets some more attention here. I'm not that hopeful. Like, I kind of think it'll be something people were watching. You get some new fans in there potentially, but I don't think hockey ever really takes off in America. Where it's at the same level as the top 3 sports. I mean, right now NFL's king by far. But even competing with the NBA and Major League Baseball, I don't see that ever happening. But I'm rooting for it because I think it's a great game, a great sport, and it definitely had a phenomenal tournament to advertise to this country and to the world.
That's legit action, I feel like, on that date of the championship. That was legit action. Like, and hockey as a whole, even in the regular season, legit action. The NBA, I know, is the action-packed sport, but it's became a lollygagging game. Like a game that really, even in the regular season, people just don't play defense. People don't care sometimes.
Yeah, in fairness to the NBA, though, it's almost impossible for the NBA to have a tournament like the NHL had. Because the international competition is not nearly the same. Team USA in basketball is just far better than everybody else. You can't create a tournament like hockey can. So it's not fair to get on the NBA for that. You could criticize the NBA for what they put out there with NBA All-Star Weekend. I think it was a joke. I haven't heard anybody who said it was a good thing. But I don't think it's fair to compare the NBA and the NHL in terms of an international tournament. The basketball just can't compete with hockey in that regard. And then again, like I just said, you'll get some new fans of hockey. You'll get some growth for the game here in America, but nothing that is going to propel hockey to be in the conversation with basketball and baseball. Again, football's king, but hockey's always going to be the 4th sport here.
Yeah, I think it's a game that isn't really that popular, but it is It is. It
Well,
is
it's
amazing.
popular in certain places. Like
Yeah.
they had
No, I mean,
the championship in Boston for a reason because hockey's huge in Boston in that area.
Yeah. I think it's not huge around here, but when the
I mean,
Rangers,
it's pretty big in New York, not as big as Boston,
yeah,
but New York is a good hockey
but
town.
when the Rangers are good and they're in the playoffs, like the Knicks and the Rangers were in the playoffs, that was New York heaven. That was great when the Knicks were competing and
Yeah, I mean,
Rangers.
I think New York is a candidate to host a Four Nations face-off if they ever have it again. If they do it a few years down the road and they change sites, maybe they just go with Montreal and Boston again. But I can see it being Toronto and New York. I mean, you would sell out the Garden easily, and the tickets would be through the roof in terms of price. But look, it was a great thing for hockey, and just as a sports fan, a lot of people tuned in. The ratings were really good. Ticket prices. I mean, there was a lot of demand for it, a lot of excitement. So, it's nice. It's nice for hockey. I don't think it's ever going to go beyond the regional sport in America. Baseball has become more and more regional too, not to the extent of hockey, but hey, I mean, just as a sports fan, I mean, that was tremendous, and credit to the NHL for coming up with something that really, really captivated our country, and captivated Canada and captivated other parts of the world too.
Yeah, it was huge to see. Um, it was huge to just see like the competitiveness from an All-Star game. I didn't even know it was an All-Star game for half of the time. I thought it was like a kind of special in this
Yeah,
season, like maybe like at the beginning of the season. I didn't even know.
I thought the same thing when they first announced it. Then I found out it was in place of the All-Star weekend. But yeah, at first when I just saw it was announced the Four Nations face-off, I
It's
thought
an
they created another international tournament. I didn't think it was the replacement for the NHL All-Star weekend. But
it's an
what a
unrealistic. It's a unrealistic. It's an unrealistic thing to tell the NBA, but this thing was king because people were getting hurt and playing through it. And they're like, okay, this guy's going to play through it today, but he's going to miss a month or 2 months of the regular season. I'm like, what? It's the All-Star game.
yeah.
But these guys really
But when
give
you
100%.
create a tournament that's legitimate international
Yeah,
competition,
they're going to play through their
yeah,
injuries, and
but
they're not going to care about
basketball cannot match hockey in that regard. It's not a knock on basketball. It's just not the same thing. And Team USA is so much better than everybody else in basketball. So you can't do it. You can't get four countries to be in a Four Nations tournament for basketball and it be anywhere near what the hockey tournament was.
Yeah, because teams that are great that aren't the USA usually just have this one. Like for Serbia, it's Jokic. There's no one that really can compete with the USA. So yeah, with that team, it's usually just Jokic and no one else, or Giannis and just Giannis and friends, or Jokic and friends. So they cannot really beat the USA. So the NBA are at a disadvantage, but I feel like these guys can take a little bit and learn that you got to give some effort in these games, because comparing that to what the NHL players
I
did,
don't think the NBA has to worry about the All-Star weekend. I think it's blown out of proportion. It's not that big a deal. Honestly, just go back to the old game. Just East versus West, whatever. Just like I don't think it's that big a deal. I think there's people who make way too big a deal of it. I think it's more so about the NBA product throughout the regular season. I'll leave the playoffs alone. They step it up in the playoffs. The playoffs are still largely really good competition. I don't think it matches what it used to be, but it's still really good competition. But I think it's making the game a lot better in the regular season, and enough with the load management and getting guys to go after it all year and, step up the defensive intensity. I know there's people say, oh, it gets blown out of proportion. The guys do play defense, but I mean, when you have games that are this high scoring, I know the three-point shooting is prolific. There's been growth and advancement in the game in that regard. I'm not a big fan of how far the metrics go in the analytics, but metrics and analytics have advanced the game in some ways for sure. So it's increased offensive output, but the basketball, the pendulum needs to come more back towards defense. It's way too much offense. Pendulum's got to come back some, and you You need to make the regular season more appealing. That's much more important than making NBA All-Star Weekend appealing. I don't think that's a big deal at all.
That should be more treated as a break, in my opinion. It's an all-star break at the end of the day. I know the festivities.
And if you want to do a USA versus the world game, then do like whatever. Just the Chuck Kenny, Shaq, Candace teams, like that's just such a joke. Like, come on, it's embarrassing. Come on, like, I don't know who sits in the room and says that's a good idea. So just East versus West, or go USA versus the world. I don't know, hype it up. I don't know, put something on the line for it. Money, always put money on the line. Always increases things. I heard some idea. Bill Simmons, Bill Simmons.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where is he now? He was ESPN a long time.
Sadly. Yeah.
But Bill Simmons was talking about some idea for NBA All-Star Weekend. I don't remember the whole thing. It's on the internet. We can look it up, maybe talk about it soon.
Who cares what he says? I'm just kidding. Who cares what he says? I'm just kidding.
Honestly, Jack, I don't remember the idea offhand, but I was listening to him like, it sounds like something that could be interesting. It involved money on the line and rookies, the USA versus the world, I think. So if somebody
maybe
wants to
for home court advantage
in
the finals.
What's that?
Maybe for home court advantages in the finals.
Oh, yes, that's what it was, Jack. Home court advantage in the finals. That there would be one game that's home court advantage in the finals. You know what? We'll do it next show. Let's look at. It's actually worth talking about. It was. I thought it was a very interesting idea. Home court of the finals, but it went more detailed than that. It had. I think he had the players from the top 5 teams in each conference playing in one All-Star game with home court in the NBA Finals on the line, because you only want to have players playing in that whose teams could make the NBA Finals. And then it was another All-Star game that included the rest of the league versus the younger players, something like that, and there was money on the line. So it was 2 All-Star games. And it's coming back to me. Like, it was actually, I think, a pretty cool idea. And then it was one game was Saturday night, one game was Sunday night. The dunk contest was Saturday night. The 3-point contest was Sunday night. So maybe you and I, what we could do, we could read up on it and then talk about it on next week's show.
Yeah, I'd say you just wanted to split the NBA All-Star game into 2 games.
Yeah, it's a cool idea. It might work. And home court advantage in the NBA Finals, that spices it up. Baseball did that with the World Series, and at first I thought it was exciting. Then I thought it was time for it to go away, and it did. But that'll spice it up a bit. But again, I don't think it's that big a deal. Like, it's NBA All-Star Weekend. It's not a big deal.
Criteria for Sunday: only players from teams ranked in the top 5 seeds of each conference are eligible, ensuring participants have a vested interest in the outcome. Each team comprises 7 players plus 1 commissioner's pick to account for the standout performance from the lower seeded teams. FIBA rules: reduced game duration to 40 minutes. Incentives: players opting out of the All-Star game without valid reason will be ineligible for selection the following year, emphasizing the honor and privilege of participation.
Yeah, I don't know if they'll be able to do that, with the union, but I mean, the idea of having home court advantage in the NBA Finals on the line, I mean, go for it. It can't hurt.
It can't hurt because players are going to play for something. They kind of, that's kind of a way that I think, like, I don't think it's all, like, you got to find, like, money is great, but you got to find money in something that they will compete for.
But the other game that he proposes, because there's another game that he would have, he'd have 2 All-Star games. The other one, there's money on the line.
Yeah.
So it's a cool idea. But again, Jack, I don't think it's a big deal, NBA All-Star Weekend, in terms of the health of the NBA. I think the NBA has much bigger problems. You got to make the NBA regular season product a lot better.
Yeah. So that's going to do it for this episode of Jackson Being Frank, and we will watch the rest of the season for the Knicks, of course, and how they will win those games. I talked about it all in this episode, and we talked about it all in this episode. And we will monitor the Mets and the rest of the MLB as they go through spring training. What new injuries could happen, because it's not over yet, I guess.
We got to talk about the Yankees. We don't talk
Yeah,
about them at
and
all.
the Yankees and whatever.
Neither of us want to, but we'll talk about them. They're
They
near us.
lifted they lifted the beard policy.
Yeah, we could. That'd be a fun debate.
And
How
that's
about that next week?
about the MLB and then spring training and that whole month of that stuff. So yeah, and that will do it, and we'll see you next time.